Las Vegas Raiders Training Camp. The real story. Training camp is up and running in Las Vegas, and I'll be straight with you. What's coming out of that facility right now is not what most people thought they'd be hearing this soon into camp. The early word on Fernando Mendoza isn't just encouraging. It's the kind of buzz that makes you sit back, reassess, and genuinely rethink what this franchise might be capable of pulling off in the not-so-distant future. And there's a lot happening across this roster all at once. Depth chart battles that are still very much up in the air. Undrafted free agent stories that actually deserve your attention. A secondary competition that could totally reshape what this defense looks like come week 1. And then there's the quarterback situation. Still the most important, most talked about, most watched piece of everything going on inside that building. Let me walk you through all of it, starting right where it matters most. Mendoza first, because everything else revolves around him. Let's talk Mendoza first, because everything else on this roster ultimately spins around what happens at the quarterback spot. And what's been filtering out of these early camp sessions is genuinely worth pausing on, not brushing off as the usual. Everyone looks great in shorts, summer optimism. Start with the physical profile, because it commands your attention the moment you hear it. The guy is 6'5", over 230 pounds, a classic. Old-school pocket passer build with long arms and the kind of frame that lets a quarterback absorb the occasional hit without completely losing his bearings downfield. That's not a small thing. A lot of young quarterbacks get rattled by contact, start bracing for it before it even arrives, and suddenly their eyes stop working past the line of scrimmage. Mendoza's body was built to handle that. Now the arm. Pre-draft, some evaluators had real doubts. Reportedly, those doubts were misplaced. He's not going to be dropping jaw-dropping deep balls that leave defensive backs wondering what just happened. But he can push the ball into every window Clint Kubak's system opens up. On time, with zip, and with the kind of velocity that makes a receiver's life easier while simultaneously making a cornerback's life considerably harder. That's a functional arm. That's a useful arm. Don't underestimate it. The comparisons making the rounds right now? Think Sam Darnold's mobility and overall build mixed with Jared Goff's size and frame. Honestly, that's a decent place to start when you're trying to picture what Mendoza looks like as a physical player, though I'd be careful about leaning too hard on it. Because here's the thing about Darnold. His career is basically a cautionary tale about what happens when an organization throws a young quarterback into a broken situation and just expects him to figure it out. The Jets grabbed him, surrounded him with almost nothing, and watched a genuinely talented player nearly sink before things finally changed. And when things did change, when he landed somewhere with the right system and the right people around him, he looked like a completely different quarterback. That wasn't some miraculous transformation. That was Darnold finally operating in conditions that actually fit what he needed. Mendoza walks into those right conditions from day one of his professional career. The system fits. The coaching infrastructure is solid. The veteran presence is there. He doesn't have to survive a nightmare scenario before finding a functional one. He's starting in a good situation. That matters more than people usually give it credit for. The detail that actually tells you everything. Here's the thing about Mendoza that keeps pulling me back. And it's not the arm velocity reports, or the physical measurements, or the system fit. It's this. He turned down a trip to the White House. He's a rookie quarterback. He was just taken first overall in the entire NFL draft. The entire football conversation was centered on him for months. And when that moment came, his response was to stay at the facility, get extra reps in, and keep absorbing the playbook. Nobody tells a first overall pick he has to skip the White House to go throw routes. That's not a coaching staff directive. That kind of choice comes from somewhere deep inside a player, from a very specific understanding of where he is in his development and what this particular moment actually demands of him. regardless of what would look more impressive, more celebrated, or more photographed to the outside world. And it doesn't stop there. Reports out of camp describe Mendoza already showing up before official practice begins to take snaps, both under center and out of the shotgun, specifically to start building his timing and communication with center Tyler Linderbaum. These two are new to each other, new to this organization, learning a brand new offense at the same time. That quarterback-center connection, the almost wordless understanding of exactly how the ball will be delivered when the center's weight shifts, how the shotgun snap feels under different defensive looks, that takes repetitions to develop. You can't shortcut it. And Mendoza isn't sitting around waiting for the practice schedule to hand him those reps. He's out there early, voluntarily, doing work that won't show up in any box score but will absolutely show up when the games are real and the margin for error starts to bite. That's the detail that matters most to me. Full stop. The quarterback competition, an honest look. Let's talk about the quarterback competition, because the emotional version of this conversation does a real disservice to what's actually a fairly nuanced organizational situation. Kirk Cousins is currently trending toward winning the Week 1 starting job. That's the honest read from what's coming out of camp. And I think it deserves a real, genuine examination rather than a knee-jerk reaction either way. The argument for holding Mendoza back initially isn't a weak one. There's a legitimate school of thought in football development, and it's been around a long time, that says the most responsible thing you can do for a young quarterback is carefully manage his exposure, to live NFL pressure until the system is fully internalized and whatever confidence he's carrying is built on real foundation, not just natural ability operating without enough structural support underneath it. 15 or 20 years ago, this was simply standard procedure. First-round quarterbacks sat, watched, absorbed, and were shielded from live fire until the coaching staff had real evidence of readiness, not just projections of potential. And again, Darnold. He's the perfect illustration of what happens when organizational impatience overrides the developmental patience required to actually protect a young quarterback's long-term ceiling. Thrown into the Jets with almost nothing around him, the accumulation of bad plays, poor protection, and losing environments built habits and decision-making patterns into him that took years to undo. His career nearly ended before he turned 26. When he finally landed in the right situation, what came out of it was the player the original evaluation always believed was in there. The lesson isn't that Darnold was always going to be fine no matter what. The lesson is that development timelines require protection to unfold the way they're supposed to. Organizations that strip away that protection because of impatience or external pressure pay for it in developmental damage that often isn't even fully visible until it's already been done. So I understand the organizational logic around managing Mendoza's introduction. I genuinely do. But here is my actual position, and I'm going to be direct about it. If Mendoza goes through the full, competitive process of training camp and shows this coaching staff that he's ready to operate in this system from week 1, then the decision has to be to start him. And when you make that decision, you commit to a genuine sample size. I'm talking a minimum of 10 games before any serious evaluative recalibration, not 5, not 3, 10. Because anything shorter than 10 games isn't a meaningful sample of what a developing quarterback is actually capable of. It's a panic window. And the damage done to young quarterbacks inside panic windows is real. It is documented. And it is consistently underestimated by organizations that don't have the patience the process genuinely requires. You give him the reps, the games, the real organizational commitment that allows growth to happen without a player spending every snap monitoring the sideline to see if the veteran is warming up because the coaches have already quietly moved on. That is the actual difference between what happened to an entire generation of quarterbacks and what should happen with Mendoza. not whether you start him immediately or wait a few weeks. The difference is whether the organizational commitment behind that decision is real. Whether you actually believe in this player enough to back it up with your actions over time, not just your press conferences. The secondary, the most underrated story of this entire rebuild. Let me bring you over to the secondary now, because the transformation happening in this part of the roster is one of the most underappreciated stories of this entire Raiders rebuild. Jermaine McCollum, you're the corner the Raiders nabbed at pick 101 to his practicing. The knee is holding up, and the athleticism that made him a consensus first-round prospect before the injury is reportedly showing up on the practice field in ways that fully justify the original pre-injury evaluation. There are scouts around this league who believed McCollum was the most likely candidate to be the first cornerback taken in this entire draft class if he had stayed healthy. The Raiders got him in the 4th round. Think about that for a second. Let it land. That is an organizational win of the first order, and if his knee continues to respond the way it has been, the patience required to develop him at whatever pace his body demands is absolutely worth it. His ceiling is the real deal. Stokes is another name generating genuine buzz in camp. Elite speed, physical and aggressive, and the versatility to function as a box safety who can bang against the run while also carrying enough athleticism to operate comfortably in space when coverage demands it. That combination at that position has been a genuine structural problem for this defense for years. Stokes looks like the specific answer to that problem. Step back and take in the full picture of what this secondary looks like right now versus what it was producing 2 or 3 seasons ago, when this group was practically a guaranteed touchdown every single time an opposing quarterback glanced their direction. And the transformation is not a small thing. The 3rd and 4th corners on this current roster are better football players than what was starting for this franchise not long ago. Steve Spagnuolo and Clint Kubiak have rebuilt this secondary from the ground up. That's not optimism talking. That's just what the evidence in front of us actually says what the secondary means for Max Crosby and what that secondary improvement means for Max Crosby specifically deserves more direct attention than it usually gets in this conversation. Crosby has been one of the most disruptive edge rushers in the entire league for years. He's done it while operating behind a secondary that consistently gave opposing quarterbacks a perfectly good reason to pull the ball down and escape the pocket. When a quarterback knows he can tuck it and find a receiver because the corners behind the pass rush can't hold coverage together, the pressure the edge rusher generates gets neutralized. The quarterback simply runs away from it. The stat line suffers. The actual dominance the pass rusher is capable of gets buried under the limitations of everyone around him. Now give Crosby a secondary that forces quarterbacks to hold the ball. That makes them genuinely reluctant to scramble because they don't trust what's waiting for them when they do. And the disruption he creates becomes exponentially more impactful. Great secondaries make great pass rushers look even greater. The Raiders are building that combination for the first time in Crosby's entire professional career. That's not a minor footnote. That could be a major storyline by the time December rolls around. Wide receiver competition. More interesting than you think. The wide receiver competition below the established depth chart is one of the more genuinely open battles in camp right now. And I find it considerably more interesting than the coverage has given it credit for being. The top of the depth chart is settled. Below that, 3 or 4 legitimate roster spots are up for grabs among a group that includes Benson, Thornton, Williams, Rice, and Jackson. And several of these guys are making a real case for themselves. Benson is standing out. Quick release off the line, real precision in his route running, and the kind of separation-creating ability that earns a quarterback's trust fast. Because when the ball goes to him, it reliably arrives where the route concept needs it to be. Thornton has work to do. Draft status is not a roster guarantee when other players are legitimately outperforming you in real competitive evaluation. He's being held to the same standard as everyone else in that group. As it should be. Williams is the player I find most fascinating in this entire receiver competition, and a big part of that is the built-in relationship he carries into the building. From his time playing alongside Mendoza at Indiana, that pre-existing connection between a developing quarterback and a receiver he already trusts from hundreds of real college repetitions together has genuine competitive value that doesn't always register clearly in traditional evaluation frameworks. The chemistry is already there. The timing is already established. When a franchise is developing a young quarterback, having a receiver in the building who already speaks his offensive language fluently is worth more than pure individual talent measurement would suggest. Williams has reportedly shown enough in camp that if the Raiders ultimately stash him on the practice squad, multiple teams will be making calls to pull him away. That is not a player you lose without consequences. Running back and quarterback depth. The running back picture has a clear structure around it. Mike Washington is the guy, explosive, athletically exceptional out of Arkansas, with a combine profile that placed him among the most physically gifted players tested at his position in recent memory. Behind him, Himby is currently reading as the most likely undrafted free agent to earn a roster spot in that group. He won't dazzle you with one elite attribute that turns heads, but he's a complete, functional player across every required dimension: pass protection, receiving out of the backfield, running between the tackles, special teams contribution. That complete profile is exactly what a backup running back needs to be to justify a spot on a team with real ambitions. Add Hayward at fullback, and the four-man group covers every functional need without wasting a roster spot. Behind Cousins and Mendoza at quarterback, the battle for the third spot comes down to Clark and Robertson, with Clark currently holding the edge. What this coaching staff is clearly prioritizing in that evaluation is system alignment. Finding a quarterback whose approach mirrors what the offense is actually designed to run, rather than someone whose style would force the entire infrastructure to shift around him in an emergency. Kubak's West Coast system runs on timing, rhythm, and a specific decision-making cadence. A backup who speaks a completely different offensive language introduces unnecessary risk at precisely the moment backup quarterbacks tend to get called on. Clark fitting the offensive profile matters a lot. The developmental long game. Henning finally. Nicholas Henning, the offensive tackle out of Canada who the Raiders signed following the CFL draft, rounds out the developmental picture on the offensive line. At 6'6" and 320 pounds, he came to football relatively late and is still in the early stages of translating his physical gifts into the specific technical demands of playing tackle at the professional level. He is not going to compete for a starting spot in year one. That's not what this signing is about. What it's about is the developmental ceiling sitting inside that physical profile. The size, the movement quality, the raw athletic tools worth investing serious coaching into on the practice squad while the rest of the roster competes. The Raiders have shown throughout this rebuild that they're willing to take those kinds of long-term developmental shots at premium positions. Henning is exactly that kind of investment. The big picture. Here's what I want you to take away from everything happening in Las Vegas right now, because the individual stories are genuinely important. But the bigger picture they form together is what actually matters. This roster is different in kind from anything this organization has assembled in years. Not cosmetically different, not different in the press release sense, structurally different, in ways that produce durable outcomes rather than just generating a season or two of excitement before the whole thing resets again. The secondary moved from a chronic, embarrassing liability to a legitimate strength in a compressed timeline. The pass rush is anchored by one of the best edge players in the sport who finally has real support operating around him. The offensive system is sophisticated, genuinely quarterback-friendly, and being run by coaches who understand how to build around a young player's development rather than just squeezing short-term performance out of him at the expense of his long-term ceiling. And at the center of all of it is a first overall pick who turned down a White House visit to throw extra passes, who shows up early to build quarterback-center chemistry before the schedule requires it, and who is demonstrating in the very first days of camp the specific kind of internal drive and professional seriousness that separates players who fulfill their evaluations from those who fall well short of them. The questions that remain are real. Who starts at quarterback when week 1 arrives? How does the receiver depth chart settle after final cuts? Can McCollum's knee hold up to the full demands of a professional workload? These are legitimate, open questions without clean answers yet. But they are the questions of a team with genuine upside and a clear organizational direction, not the questions of a franchise that's just spinning its wheels. That distinction matters. And right now, in Las Vegas, it feels like everybody in that building knows it.